Thank you so much, Thurston, for your sharing. It was informative since you gave an overall kind of concept and some of the ideas around Metaverse. And we know that it's already time, but we'll still like to take a couple of questions because it was a lot of, as we say, 干货 in Chinese, so a lot of really good quality content. While you guys are preparing for your questions, we would like to ask everybody to turn on their cameras. We'll do our group picture first, and then we'll take a couple of questions. So if you can, please, 大家可以打开视频，我们拍一个合影。I don't know how many Chinese we have in our team, just in case. Okay, perfect.
没事，我觉得我们都知道中文了。
好吧。Okay. Okay, guys. If you can turn on your camera, and we're doing it on 1, 2, 3. Smile. Don't blink. One more. 1, 2, 3. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. We do have a couple of questions. I'd like actually to ask the question first. The question is to Laura, because you shared about the consumption kind of consumer perspective. And the question that when I was listening, how do we, with so many things happening online, how do we make sure that we still build that human connection that Igor was talking about? And that is crucial, right? Because we don't want technology we want technology to work for us, not the other way around. So how do we make sure with so many young people, 15 years old, right, joining all this avatars and creating the games, how do we make sure we still keep that human connection and human bond and build that up using technology from your perspective? If you can elaborate a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, and I think it's something that actually has also been driving some of the use of the metaverse, because people are just so comfortable being online, and especially young people who now have been 2 years in the pandemic, right, not really seeing anybody. I think it's a lot about education. I think it's a lot about teaching people how to use technology in a smart way. How to also connect with humans outside of technology. I mean, it's great to connect with your friends on the metaverse and all of that, but I think it's important to not shift everything we do online. I think those enriching moments, you need to also get to know them offline, right? Even if the temptation of going into some exciting, digital world is strong. So I think it really comes down to education and maybe a little bit of government policy as well. Yeah.
Mm.
Victoria, can I make a quick comment on that too?
Yeah, of course.
Totally, and I think Laura mentioned very well this idea that what is the difference now between the digital and the physical? I think for maybe now, I don't know, I feel super integrated with you guys right here, right now. But 30 years from now, or 50 years from now, if you think long term, if you really think long term, when you think back, and if our ancestors, how they used to live a life without electricity or without sanitation, we forget that. And I just like to make a point that I happen to have here, I love archaeology, and I happen to have here this thing here. I don't know if you can see, this is an actual Neolithic arrow. It is, it has more than 9,000 years, okay? This is actually, This is an actual arrow, okay? And our ancestors used this. My ancestors, your ancestors, our ancestors used this to hunt, to give food to their family, to protect their tribes. And I happen to have this here. And this is a tool for the 2022. And the difference between this and this is zero. Zero in the sense that this was a tool. So my ancestors, your ancestors, when they use this, it says, look, I'm going to use this arrow for a specific thing. I'm going to hunt, I'm going to protect, I'm going to use, and if you happen to see and to touch one of these, this is perfect. This is made of stone, but this is a perfect design. It is well designed. It's polished. Unfortunately, you can't see in detail, but it's a perfect design. And the difference with this now is that it's also a tool. So the way we're going to use it, and as exactly like Thorsten was saying, it's up to us to use this as a tool or to use this as a drug. And I'm totally and I see how kids are being exposed to technology, how parents are exposing kids to technology. Especially like I see what's happening in the West, and it's disgraceful. And if we think about this, the potential for this, and I'm pretty sure that the head of the tribe, to be allowed to use one of these, look, I'm going to teach you, you're going to learn how to use it, but you're going to have the right to use it, and you're going to use it properly. It's no different than here. So I think it's totally about education, but also exposing and limiting at the same time.
Exactly. This is what we experienced as the community at SCOLAR as well. While being a purely offline-oriented, Beijing-based community, and then 2020 happened, nobody heard about, well, from our side, about Zoom before. And then right now we're every day on Zoom. And the next question is, how do we use that technology with Meta and transform our community? But the center of it, it's still about community. So the question that we ask ourselves is, how do we use the technology to empower our community internationally, right? And how do we build on top of that? Perfect. Thank you so much for your answers. Alejandra, if I'm pronouncing it right, would you like to ask one of your questions? You wrote two, but maybe just start with one.
Yes,
and so we have more people asking.
Thank you, everybody.
I
have the first question is because I recently heard about this concept that is called the tech feudalism. And this tech feudalism has kind of like two varieties of how it is discussed, at least how I discover it is discussed first. The idea that the metaverse, they look very attractive, very nice. Yes, but if you see it from the point of view of the owner and the capacity the owner has to dictate the rules and everything that happens there, it is not an open, free space for people. And actually, there's I learned from people in the field that very few metaverses actually connect between each other. So it's like if you are inside this bubble made of made by Meta, you're kind of like trapped, right? You cannot communicate if they don't want you to communicate. You cannot, like, you have a value in terms of as a consumer. So it is as enabling as they decide. Firstly, this is my first question. What is your take on this? And the other one has a political dimension, because since the cooling off of the relationship between China and the US, this conflict or tension has spilled over other areas. And one that is really affected is technology, because technology development has many things to do with sharing and, not having a nationality and kind of like having minds connected across borders. So I want to hear your take about it. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I feel kind of the question resonates with my work because I look into some of the consequences of this hyper digitalization what we're facing. But let me do one comment to the previous question is this dichotomy between the virtual and the digital and the real world. I think the virtual reality you have to turn it on the head why it works so well, because for us the virtual is already real. So when we see images, war images, for example, there were some of the early wars happened in Iraq, in the Middle East, etc., like 10 or 20 years ago. There were already fabricated images, so it's not to contest whether they're true or not, but we buy into that virtuality. So the virtual is already the real for us. So that makes it very easy to step into that world, because in the end, there's no big difference, except that it's technologically much nicer than in the metaverse world, because it looks then, like a nice game in a way. It's a fully gamified experience. And that's because also if you think of the psychology again, that there's 3 elements. There's a real core, which you cannot access. You know, what happened in your very early childhood, you don't know, because you were not mastering your consciousness in that way, and language. So it's just deeply stored in your body. It's there, but you cannot access it. Then you have the symbolic, which is the language. We don't own the language. It is bigger than each of us. You know, the language, the cultural elements. And then you have the fantasy. The fantasy, that's the third one. That's the only what we have as an individual. So we have these phantasmatic experiences. So that basically means the metaverse is a phantasmatic experience. We're already doing it in our normal psychological life since humanity exists, in a way. So it's a kind of a natural progression. So coming to Alejandra's intervention is basically, yes, I think the inequalities and the challenge of concentration of resources and of capabilities in the space, like with AI, you know, when these big companies like Google, Tencent, Alibaba, when they concentrate AI capabilities, smaller companies will have it very difficult to use that, right? And the metaverse is another platform, and we need to prevent, or each society has a responsibility to prevent that the concentration happens of certain capabilities and, you know, access to the data and access to actually what we think and what we feel and what we believe, you know, because the metaverse will much better know what you like, right? As we know already in Facebook or TikTok, and they say, oh, this, you know, coming always the right videos, and it makes always sense in a way. Right? It's already scary. So, but I think there are elements where the government has to intervene and how they do it. So, and there's one emerging is this notion of learning and mobilization platform, and the element is, it is not this platform economy as we know it, and which is regulated these days. Like today with the Digital Service Act in Europe, or Digital Market Act in China, this big one, there was a kind of a crackdown on these big tech companies because they gained too much power in the way, and society didn't like it, right? So we were quite suspicious with what did they do with our data. And I think that will, of course, it will prevail. The one way to do it, especially for countries which have not enough data, which at the most, except the US has it, China has it, Europe is lagging behind already, but there's a whole global south which don't have it, yeah? And they are actually, the risk is they are left behind. They're pure consumers of metaverse and not creators of metaverse, maybe, yeah? They can create their cultural elements there, but maybe they might not own it. So here we have to create shared data spaces. So it's in the end, it's just a platform and technology, and they need to be inclusive, shared, or trusted data spaces where you don't lose your data, where you remain the sovereign of your data, where you can delete or have the right to delete the data and to protect your identity. Of course, that causes some issues whom we trust. In the West, especially in the United States, this kind of activity is privatized, right? In a way that Google has to do it. Google has to give you the right to delete the data. And whereas in China, the one is not privatized because the government can strongly intervene. And there's a big trust into the central government, and that people think the government will do the right thing with my data. So the concept behind it is called federation, digital federation, so that you build trusted data spaces. In the end, the metaverse is a data space, right? And that you are, to some extent, remain the sovereign over your data. That could be a way to, you know, to make it bearable and to prevent a dystopian, you know, development of metaverse. So that would be my, but you know, with the technological drive and with the capitalist drive, you know, profit seeking, concentration of resources, there will be never a final solution to tackle that. That will be ongoing tension between regulators, companies, innovators, you know, to push the boundaries and then to deliver for society.
Hello, everyone. I would just like to say that we are on the right track. Why? because people on this panel are talking about the positive side of the metaverse and the negative side of the metaverse. When we are considering the both sides, that means we will find a solution in between solution. So yes, there is always a tools for positive side and negative side, but we are on the right track. If metaverse is developing, we will be using it, our children will be using it. In which form, I don't know, but we will be using it. So we have to be skeptical to create a ethics embedded in the code of the metaverse, but we have to be positive to use it.
Salman, sorry to interrupt you. Maybe you can just go ahead with the question, because some of our guests need to go. So if you have a question, you can
Yeah,
just
that's all from my side. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, Yuya, would you like to take it over?
Yeah, sure. Well, I just want to, everything just in one word. Thank you so much for coming and joining us today. This has been really, really informative, insightful, and also like really thought-provoking process, just listening to all three speakers speaking from their perspective, their expertise. And I do believe that our conversation doesn't end today. We have a group chat every time, or just whenever you have any question, just drop it there, any comments. I'm sure we will, the exchange will continue. And yeah, that is everything on my side. Because do you have anything to comment?
Yes. No. Thank you so much. It was a really fruitful discussion, and we will make sure to get the word out with a recording and spreading out it further.